across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart TV, on the app. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. Well, our faith panel, I should call it a belief panel today because it's slightly different. Joining us today, we have the Reverend Jodie Stoll, who is vicar at St. Michael's in Harrow. And we also have George the Psychic, who is a medium. I know it's not a religion, but a hell of a lot of people around the world believe in psychics and mediums. So I thought it'd be interesting to get a psychic's take on matters of faith. Now, a couple of stories in the headline. There's this woman, Charlotte Holmes, back in 2019, who died, and she says she went to heaven. She saw a little baby there, and that was the child that she lost at 5 months, when she was 5 months pregnant. But following this heartwarming reunion, Charlotte said that God chose to show her one more thing, the edge of hell. She said, I looked down and the smell, and then the rotten flesh. That's what it smelled like. And then screams, she recounted. After seeing the beauty of heaven, the contrast to seeing hell is almost unbearable. And she continued, and God said, I show you this to tell you, if some of them do not change their ways, this is where they shall reside. Then she told her father said, go back and share. And she, and she was drawn back into her body, and she was back in her hospital bed. So my question to my panel today, is there a hell on earth, do you think? Certain situations that can only be described as hell. And then if there are those places like hell on earth, it seems to me when I think of Gaza, when I think of, what happened to the hostages, who were taken in Israel, that was hell, but that wasn't it happening to bad people. And we're taught that hell is where bad people go. So if there's a hell on earth, or is it just in the afterlife we talk about hell? What is hell? And I'm going to ask our psychic something when we get in as well. Does he ever see souls who've come back from hell? As I said before, joining us now, Reverend Jodie Stoll and St. George the Psychic. Jodie, is there a hell on earth, do you think? Because if there is, it seems that there's no discerning whether you're good, bad, or what you had for breakfast yesterday, or is it only in the afterlife? Talk us through the Christian view of what and where hell is.
Yeah, I mean, these are really kind of juicy questions you've got for us today, Trisha. I think what I want to say is that, so the famous prayer, the Lord's Prayer, which Christians, say together often in church to get most Sundays, one of the lines from that is for the Lord to bring the kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. Right. And I just want to, we've kind of, it's a bit of a shift from what people would mainly think about. People think of heaven as being, heaven's up there, on the clouds, all kind of spirity and harps and angels, and down there it's all kind of little devils with pitchforks and that kind of thing. But actually, a lot of the imagery that we have about that comes from sort of medieval paintings and artwork and things like that, and not necessarily the actual kind of biblical story or Christian theology. There's a lot which talks about, in terms of Christian theology, about heaven being a sort of dimension. And heaven is coming. We talk about the God's kingdom coming on earth as it is in heaven. So we can think about that in the other way as well, that there are places where, kind of these glimpses of heaven come through on earth for us. There are also these spaces where what we would think of as hellish comes through for us on earth, just as you were saying. So there's very much this kind of sense of that, human beings, as those made in the image of God, we are called to be the hands and feet of Jesus, you know, on the earth as it is now. So kind of bringing God's kingdom in, that kingdom which we think of as being about love and mercy and justice and kindness and all those kinds of things, so that we can be part of the bringing about of heaven on earth now. Now, as human beings, as you know, we can choose to do the opposite of that. So really, there's a very human choice, because we, you know, the Christian story would say we're made in the image of God. We're made to do those things which bring those things of God onto the earth here and now. It's not just about what we would say pie in the sky, you know, as you die kind of thing. It's actually about,
absolutely. You know, that reminds me, I mean, right at the beginning of the show, I quoted Jimi Hendrix as saying, when the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace. And that really harks back to that. Let me come to you, George, the psychic. What are your thoughts on this? I don't know, George, if you follow a particular religion or a faith, but as a psychic, is there hell or on earth, or just in the afterlife? And do you ever see souls who have come back from hell? Because we think of, you know, or contact souls who have come back from hell.
I relate a lot to what Jodie said, and the fact that people can be good and can be bad, and there's maybe more, in my view, a bit more of a darkness in some people than there is than light. And so then the understanding, as me as a spiritualist, we believe that when we you know, go into this other dimension or the spirit world or heaven, however you look at it, then these people then get to kind of look and review their life and learn lessons. So then we talk about people being reborn and being able to be, you know, learn from those lessons of mistakes. So we look at what we know as angels coming from the church kind of belief and the spiritual belief. We look at, and especially me personally, I look at these being these ascended beings that will maybe help these dark people who have done some horrible things, and in my understanding, we all go to the same place, and in that place we're all then, you know, these ascended beings, angels, whatever you want to, however people want to call them, they then help these troubled souls work through that part of their life to then come back and be reborn. So there's a kind of understanding in the spirit world of a school of learning. There's different places that you can go to learn to be. So I could choose to be reborn after this life to be a child that lives till they were 6. And part of that journey and lesson will be a choice that's then made to come back and live in that life. Other people live on and become what we know as these angels or ascended beings that they lose their personality. So, for example, I would maybe no longer be George, and I'd no longer be a man, and I would no longer be somebody who has a sarcastic sense of humour. I lose all of those faculties and qualities to become these kind of angels, ascended beings, to then help people who are troubled souls cross over. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, as a medium, though, does anybody do evil people come through? You know, we talk about hell. Are there people who bring their hell or their souls when you summon them? I mean, because every horror story film I've ever seen, you know, tends to be talk about evil being powerful and coming back. I mean, does that happen? Have you brought back people that you've thought this person's really evil and is hellish?
Yeah, so there's been, my main work is mediumship, so I do more connection with spirit than any of the psychic work, which is more guidance and tapping into you as a person. And they're two very different things, the psychic work and the mediumship work. So I have read for people, for example, you know, a lady's come and her father has come through and he was not a very nice person. He was maybe abusive. He was maybe an aggressive person. And so then he comes through and then she wouldn't recognize him as a nice person. But in the spirit world, he may have been helped to work through all the darkness in him to then come in and want to say he's sorry. But if I say to this lady, oh, your dad's here and he was wonderful and he was loving, she would not recognize him. So she couldn't validate that. And then she would tell me, no, George, you're wrong. So he would show himself as the maybe not so nice, evil part of him to then come in and say, you know, you can validate that. Yes, he wants to say sorry. He wants to give. Not everybody does that though. Some people are on their own journey in the spirit world and they then make their choices to just be not nice. And they can take longer to work on themselves than others.
Well, I wish they'd work on themselves when they were still alive. That would help the world,
Yes.
wouldn't it?
Oh, goodness, yes.
Stay with us. Absolutely. Stay with us for more with our faith panel right after this.
Since the day that I announced my candidacy, I set out to find a partner who can help build this brighter future. So Pennsylvania, I'm here today because I found such a leader. Governor Tim Walz of the great state of Minnesota.
J.D. Vance. This guy turned out to be an absolute star. He's a great senator and a real fighter. He's a former Marine and a Yale-educated lawyer. He's a great student.
And so now we got some work to do. We need to move to the general election and win that.
I'm going to bring this home. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank our next Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart TV, on the app, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to a faith panel with a bit of a difference today. Joining me, the Reverend Jody Stoll, who is vicar at St Michael's in Harrow, and spiritualist George the Psychic, who is a medium. This story that in the one of the stories that I picked out in the news, lots of sort of clickbait headlines, but I want to bore down into. This is Pastor Dia Moodley. Apparently tempers flared. He was outside Bristol University, speaking outside Bristol University. And he was asked a question by a Muslim man. Now, he stated his belief, this pastor stated his belief that there are differences between, quote, moral standards of the God of Islam and the Christian God. So here's the question, and I'm going to start with you again, Jody. Is every religion that believes in one God talking about the same God, or do they all believe that their God is different from the God other faiths worship? I mean, you know, this is my God is better than your God is sometimes, and quite often, it's not spoken out loud, but I'd suggest it's probably at the nub of a lot of clashes between various faiths. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to say that we're thinking particularly of the monotheistic faiths with, you know, when it's a conversation between Christians and Muslims and Jews. And I think what I would want to say is that for me, there's very much a recognition, you know, I talk about us as sort of faith cousins, because actually we share a lot of our scriptures, a lot of our stories include characters which you can see in the other scriptures. So Abraham, you know, shared between all three. And I think it's really respectful for us to recognize that there are differences in how we have come to understand who God is and how to worship that God. But I would definitely recognize that we are all attempting to worship what we see as the one God who sort of, you know, made the whole shebang, you know, the one God who is the creator of the universe and all things. That's what we're trying to do. Now, why am I a Christian and not a Jew and not a Muslim? And that for me is because of Jesus, and because I believe that what we're looking for as humans doing this kind of searching faith thing, I think, is to have God revealed to us in the most authentic form, to know God the most. And so for Christians, we would say that Jesus is that. Jesus is the revelation of what God is like, as much as you can get on earth at this point in time. Literally, God has come to earth to show us what God is like. And so that's why I would say I'm a Christian and I'm not of another faith, but I would also want to recognize that we're searching for God. This is what we're trying to do.
It's the same God. It's an interesting study just out in the States that showed that. And this surprised me, that the lack of true education and understanding about even Christianity within fundamental Christians led to a lot of misbelief and furphies, because of course remember that Christianity, I beg your pardon, Muslims and Jews came from two brothers. They were two brothers who so they all came from the same basis. And as you say, a lot of the scriptures are shared. Let me come to you, George, the psychic. Now, if a medium believes they can communicate with the spirit world, well, God is, the divine spirit and what have you. Do you communicate with God in the same way?
A lot of mediums have different views on God and the divine creator. I know that probably more modern day mediumship, a lot of people look at the God being within, or the God source, that we carry a part of God inside us, which, is part of our soul and who we are. And so we kind of look at God as everybody. So in the spirit world, your mum, your dad, your brother, sister, aunt, uncle is kind of God is within us all. And that communication comes from the divine source. So if you want to look at, I suppose it's interesting because everyone thinks that God's on this big throne, and then everyone that gets to heaven or the spirit world is all kind of dancing around his feet. And so for me and a lot of modern mediums, and not some older school mediums, but a lot of more modern mediums have the view that we're all the same. And so then again at these schools of learning and this knowledge where we don't just worship this one person, but we kind of worship each other and respect each other and love each other in that kind of way. So I've never...
Like, for instance, the Hindu, you know, a lot of Eastern beliefs that we all have part of the Godhead, or the God, you know, is a part of us. So you're saying that when you communicate with a spirit, it's not as separate. You know, I don't know if mediums pray, or do you media? I mean, you can't. I'm guessing you're not all the same. But do you pray? Is there a God to whom you pray, or is it? Yeah. Oh, there is.
Yeah, so if any spiritual church, any spiritual centre or sanctuary, we tend to start with an opening prayer. So there'll be the introduction, and then the medium gets up and has a prayer, and the belief of that prayer, and especially for me being more kind of modern, and I've not come from a belief of Catholicism or the Church of Scotland, that it's always about uniting people, because everybody in that room has come from different faiths, different backgrounds, different class systems. Some people don't know why they've walked in the door, and they're in a spiritual church. They've never experienced this. And the idea is that we bring everyone together under the same love, the same thought, that we are protected not only by the divine creator or gods. And normally people say Father Gods. I just say divine spirit, because it is the divine that lives within us that then we transcend to be part of this other dimension or spirit world or heaven. It just depends on what way you look at it. For me, it's divine spirit. I ask that all that are gathered here today are healed by the loving connections from their loved ones. And then, you know, we look at sending the words of healing. That's the kind of the prayer that we look at. And also when I do my thing, before I do a reading or an event, I start with a prayer of thanks. So divine spirit, I thank you for allowing me to be the vessel of light and communication that you choose me to be. And the people that sit in front of me today are blessed by their healing, love and communication from whoever comes through. So it's always that one love of thought.
It's so interesting to hear. You know, just coming back to you, Jodie, I mean, I've learned a lot today. What are your thoughts about spiritualism? I mean, I'm not going to ask you on behalf of the entire church, but personally.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's really, I find it really interesting to hear from all kinds of different, you know, sort of understandings of the spiritual life. I guess what, you know, one of the things that I was thinking was that, again, it's a kind of almost like busting the myth of, you know, that this sort of idea that Christian theology talks of this kind of airy-fairy spiritual world, when in actual fact, we're very much into kind of the bodily resurrection. You know, this is what Easter is all about. So that actually the next life, rather than it being more, you know, ephemeral than this life, is a more solid life. So we would talk about, actually, that's the real life. This is the dream. If you know what I mean. This, when we're becoming more and more and more human, we're becoming more and more and more what God has made us to be, and so we will become more real rather than less real. So when I guess when I think about spiritualism and those kind of conversations, that's where I sort of think, okay, you know, I would be interested to have a conversation about that, because that feels more like ephemeral. They've gone off into some spiritual world, and that's not what I think about the afterlife as being like at all. And I think the other thing I want to say is that, you know, God is not a secret. You know, there's not a secret club through which you get to know who God is. God has revealed God's self to humankind. That's what the Christian faith would say. There's not like a secret, a club, you know, password, or, you know, something like that. Actually, God is there and has revealed God's self. You know, we don't say a special word and God appears, you know, and in the opposite way, God calls us, you know, that's the sort of...
Yeah. No, you know, I asked you for that because, again, having George, I mean, as I say, it's slightly different from our faith panel, but I was fascinated in the world of spiritualism. And George, let me just give you a big thank you for appearing on the panel, because I've learned so much from you. And as usual, absolutely lovely hearing from you as well.
Thank you.
Our faith panel. You're so welcome. Reverend Jody Stowell, vicar at St Michael's in Harrow, and that was spiritualist George the Psychic Medium. Lots to think about then. Coming up after the break, Too Much Too Young in the light of the awful tragedy, the death of Liam Payne. We'll be talking a psychologist about, as Bruce Springsteen said, sadly, it's something that he's almost